Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became Ultimate Red Ranger. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. All men are not created equal. This was the harsh, unyielding truth that Izuku Midoriya had learned at the tender age of 4. It was a truth delivered not with a gentle hand, but with the cold, clinical apathy of a doctor staring at an X-ray of a perfectly normal, double-jointed pinky toe. In a world where 80% of the population possessed some sort of superhuman ability, a quirk, being normal was the ultimate abnormality. It was a death sentence to one's dreams. For Izuku, that dream had been simple, bright, and unwavering. He wanted to be a hero. He wanted to be like All Might, the symbol of peace, a towering colossus of justice who saved everyone with a fearless, booming laugh. But the universe, in its infinite irony, had skipped over Izuku when it was handing out the building blocks of greatness. He was quirkless. A blank slate in a world of vibrant, explosive colors. At 14 years old, the weight of that truth felt heavier than ever. The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of Aldera Junior High, casting long, melancholic shadows across the scarred wooden desks. The classroom hummed with the chaotic, restless energy of third-year students eager to be set free. Izuku sat near the back, his head down, furiously scribbling in his heavily worn, burnt-orange notebook titled Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. He was currently sketching the intricate water valves on the hero backdraft's gauntlets, trying to calculate the optimal pressure-to-weight ratio needed for rescue operations. "So," the homeroom teacher announced, his voice slicing through the low murmur of the room. He stood at the front, holding a thick stack of career aptitude papers. "As third-year students, it's time to start thinking seriously about your futures and what you want to do with your lives. I could pass out these career aptitude tests, but..." The teacher paused, a sly, knowing grin spreading across his face. He dramatically tossed the papers into the air. "Why bother? I know you all want to go to the hero track." The classroom erupted. Quirks flared to life in a dazzling, dangerous display of teenage exuberance. Fingers elongated, small fires danced in palms, rock-like skin hardened, and eyes glowed with unnatural light. The air filled with cheers and the sharp scent of ozone and burnt sugar. Izuku shrank down in his seat, keeping his head low, raising a single, timid hand. He didn't dare activate a quirk, because he had none to show. "Hey, teach!" A loud, abrasive voice cut through the cacophony. "Don't lump me in with this bunch of losers. I'm the real deal. These guys will be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister." The room went dead silent. Glaring from his desk with his feet propped up disrespectfully, Katsuki Bakugo wore a smirk of absolute superiority. His crimson eyes swept over his classmates, like a king surveying peasants. "You think you're better than us, Katsuki?" A student yelled, offended. "Let's go, I'll take you all on." Bakugo challenged, small, threatening explosions popping like firecrackers in the palms of his hands. "Ah, Bakugo. You're aiming for UA High, aren't you?" The teacher noted, adjusting his glasses. Gasps rippled through the room. UA High School was the pinnacle of Hero Academia. The national school. The acceptance rate was a microscopic fraction of a %. It was the school that forged legends. It was the school that created All Might. "That's exactly right." Bakugo vaulted onto his desk, standing tall and arrogant. "I aced all the mock tests. I'm the only one at this crappy middle school who has a snowball's chance in hell of getting in. I'm going to surpass All Might and become the top hero. My name will be carved in gold on the list of top earners." "Oh, right," the teacher said, glancing down at his clipboard, his voice devoid of any tact. "Midoriya, don't you want to go to UA too?" Time seemed to freeze. Izuku's breath hitched in his throat. He froze, his pencil hovering millimeters above his notebook. Slowly, the entire class turned to look at him. For a split second, there was absolute silence. Then, the laughter began. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was a roaring, suffocating tidal wave of mockery. Students pointed, clutching their stomachs. "Midoriya? No way! You can't get into the hero course just by studying. There's no rule against it." Izuku stammered, standing up defensively, his voice trembling but desperate to be heard. They got rid of that rule. I could be the first one. Before the words fully left his mouth, a violent blast of heat and kinetic force slammed into his desk. Izuku was thrown backward, crashing into the floorboards as his desk splintered. Smoke curled from the point of impact. Standing over him, palms smoking and eyes burning with unadulterated fury, was Bakugo. "Listen up, Deku!" Bakugo snarled, using the childhood nickname that meant useless. "You're even worse than the rest of these rejects. You're quirkless. You think you can stand in the same ring as me? You think they'd let a defenseless Izuku into UA? No, wait, Kaken!" Izuku scrambled backward, his hands up in a placating gesture. "It's not like I'm trying to compete with you or anything. Believe me. It's been my dream since I was little, and there's no harm in trying. Try. What can you even do?" Bakugo's voice dropped to a menacing growl. "You'd die in the exams. You're just a pebble in my path. Don't you dare forget it." The rest of the school day passed in a blur of quiet humiliation. When the final bell rang, the students scattered like leaves in the wind. Izuku remained at his desk, methodically packing his faded yellow backpack. He reached for his notebook, ready to head home and update his entry on Empty Lady's gigantification limits. A hand snatched the notebook before his fingers could graze it. Bakugo stood there, flanked by two of his lackeys. He dangled the notebook between his fingers, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "We ain't done here, Deku. Kaken, please, give it back," Izuku pleaded softly. Bakugo glanced at the cover. "Hero analysis for the future? Seriously? You're still delusional." Without a second thought, Bakugo slammed his hands together around the notebook. A fierce, concentrated explosion detonated between his palms. Izuku screamed internally as the smell of scorched paper filled the air. Bakugo casually tossed the blackened, smoking, and crumbling remains of the notebook out the open third-story window. "Most top-tier heroes have stories about their school days," Bakugo said, his voice dripping with condescension. "How they were the only ones from their mediocre middle schools to make it to the big leagues. I'm going to be the only one from Aldera to go to UA. So, here's a little advice, Deku. If you want to be a hero so badly, there's a quick way to do it. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray you're born with a quirk in your next life." The words struck Izuku like physical blows. He stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, a cold numbness spreading through his chest. Bakugo and his lackeys laughed, strolling out of the classroom, leaving Izuku utterly alone in the quiet, dusty room. The walk home was a solitary, torturous affair. Izuku had retrieved his notebook from the koi pond below the window, gently wiping the water and algae from its charred pages. He didn't take the main road through the city center. He didn't want to see the crowds, the heroes, or the bustling society that he was so thoroughly excluded from. He needed the quiet. He needed to tire himself out so he wouldn't have the energy to cry. His feet carried him, almost by muscle memory, toward the coast. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a tragedy in its own right. Decades ago, it had been a pristine stretch of golden sand and rolling blue waves. Now, it was an illegal dumping ground. Mountains of rusted refrigerators, crushed cars, broken televisions, and decaying furniture formed jagged metallic cliffs against the shoreline. It smelled of brine, rotting seaweed, and the sharp tang of oxidization. For the past 3 months, this desolate wasteland had been Izuku's secret sanctuary and his personal purgatory. He had realized that if he wanted even a fraction of a % of a chance to pass the UA physical exam, he needed to build his body. He couldn't rely on a quirk to lift debris or punch robots. He had to rely on bone, muscle, and sheer willpower. So, he had taken it upon himself to clean the beach. Dropping his backpack near a rusted-out pickup truck, Izuku changed his school jacket for a worn, sweat-stained gray t-shirt. He wrapped his hands in cheap athletic tape, ignoring the blisters that had long since popped and calloused. He walked up to a massive, waterlogged sofa that was half buried in the wet sand. "Right," Izuku whispered to himself, his voice raspy. "Let's go." He gripped the undersides of the sofa. He dug his sneakers into the sand, bending his knees, and pulled. His arms strained, the muscles in his forearms pulling taut like steel cables. His jaw locked. He squeezed his eyes shut as a wave of exertion washed over him. Slowly, Agonizingly, the sofa shifted. He dragged it backward, an inch at a time, toward the designated hauling area near the street. Take a swan dive off the roof. Bakugo's words echoed in his mind. Izuku grit his teeth and pulled harder. The sofa scraped against a discarded microwave, the screech of metal on metal piercing the quiet evening. Pray you're born with a quirk in your next life. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes, mingling with the sweat pouring down his face. Damn it, Izuku choked out, dropping the sofa. He fell to his knees in the sand, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. He looked at his shaking hands. They were covered in dirt, grease, and minor cuts. They were completely, utterly human. Why? He whispered to the crashing waves. Why just me? Why can't I have just a little bit of power? Just enough to help people. Just enough so I don't have to be useless anymore. The ocean offered no answer. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange, purple, and a deep, bruised crimson. The wind picked up, howling through the canyons of trash, causing loose pieces of sheet metal to rattle like skeletal wind chimes. Izuku wiped his eyes with the back of his arm, leaving a streak of grease across his cheek. He was about to stand up and tackle the sofa again when the ambient light around him suddenly shifted. The bruised crimson of the sunset deepened. It wasn't the natural fading of light. It was an intense, saturated, glowing red that washed over the entire beach, casting eerie, elongated shadows from the trash heaps. Izuku looked up. High above the atmosphere, a streak of fire was tearing through the sky. It wasn't a shooting star. It was far too large, too fast, and glowing with an unnatural, pulsating scarlet energy. It shrieked through the clouds, a sound like tearing canvas amplified 1,000 times over, and it was angling sharply downward. It was heading straight for the coastline. Straight for Dagoba Beach. Izuku's eyes widened in horror. His brain, ever the analytical machine, rapidly calculated the trajectory. It's going to hit. He scrambled to his feet, slipping in the loose sand, and sprinted away from the shoreline, diving behind the thickest wall of trash he could find, a stack of compressed junk cars. He covered his head and curled into a tight ball just as the object made impact. The crash was catastrophic. The earth violently shuddered. A deafening roar, louder than any explosion Bakugo had ever produced, shattered the air. The shockwave hit a microsecond later, a physical wall of displaced air and heat that blasted across the beach. Towers of trash toppled. Refrigerators were launched into the air like toys. A wave of sand and salt water rained down, blanketing the area in a thick, choking cloud of dust and steam. Izuku remained huddled beneath the junk cars, his ears ringing with a high-pitched whine. His heart hammered violently against his ribs. He waited for several agonizing seconds, coughing through the dust, before slowly uncurling himself. He checked his limbs. He was bruised, covered in sand, but intact. A villain attack? Was his first thought. Did a villain get thrown here by a hero? A meteor? His heroic instincts, the same instincts that had driven him to analyze quirks and dream of saving people, overpowered his fear. He had to see if anyone was hurt. He had to see what had crashed. Izuku crept out from behind his shelter. The landscape of the beach had been radically altered. A massive crater, easily 30 meters across, had been gouged into the sand near the water's edge. The seawater was rushing in to fill it, hissing violently as it met whatever was at the center of the impact. The air smelled of burned ozone, melted metal, and something entirely alien, like the scent of a thunderstorm compressed into a bottle. At the center of the crater, half buried in the steaming sand, was a vessel. Izuku slid down the side of the crater, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. The vessel didn't look like any jet, satellite, or quirk-made vehicle he had ever seen in his hero notes. It was sleek, aerodynamic, and made of a dark, obsidian-like metal that seemed to absorb the twilight around it. Tracing the hull were intricate, glowing red circuit lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. The front of the ship was shattered, the windshield, if it could be called that, blown outward, and lying in the sand a few feet from the wreckage was a body. "Hey!" Izuku yelled, all hesitation vanishing. He sprinted toward the figure, his sneakers sinking into the wet, hot sand. "Hey! Are you okay? Hold on, I'll call an ambulance." As he drew closer, Izuku slid to a halt, his breath catching. The figure was humanoid, but it clearly wasn't entirely human. He was clad in armor that looked simultaneously ancient and impossibly futuristic. It was primarily silver and white, with deep red accents, adorned with strange runic symbols. The armor was cracked, scorched black in places, and leaking a strange, effervescent golden mist instead of blood. The man's helmet was gone, revealing a face with sharp, aristocratic features, pale skin, and pointed ears. His hair was stark white. He looked like an elf from a fantasy novel, but his eyes were entirely black, save for pinpoint red pupils that currently flickered with fading life. Izuku dropped to his knees beside the alien warrior. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? You're hurt really bad. I don't have my phone, but I can run to the street and flag down a pro-hero. The warrior coughed, a violently wet sound, and a spurt of that golden mist escaped his lips. Slowly, agonizingly, he turned his head to look at Izuku. The pinpoint red pupils focused on the boy. When he spoke, his voice didn't come from his throat. It echoed directly inside Izuku's mind, resonant and vibrating with ancient power. A child of this realm. It is too dangerous. Flee. Izuku jumped back, clutching his head. Telepathy? Was this a hero with a telepathy quirk? I can't leave you here. You're dying. What happened? Who did this to you? The warrior raised a trembling, gauntlet hand, pointing weakly toward the sky where the rift in the clouds still lingered. The grid, the barrier is breached. The shadow followed. Before Izuku could process what that meant, the temperature on the beach plummeted. The water in the crater stopped hissing and began to freeze. A profound, suffocating sense of dread washed over Izuku, heavy enough to drop him to his hands and knees. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the world. A secondary anomaly appeared just above the crater. It wasn't a fiery meteor. It was a tear in reality itself, a jagged, purple-black rupture in the air that crackled with dark lightning. The fabric of space seemed to fold inward, and from the tear, something dropped heavily into the sand. The ground shook beneath its weight. Izuku slowly turned his head, his blood turning to ice. Standing at the edge of the crater was a nightmare. It was a towering monstrosity, easily 9 feet tall. Its body looked like it was composed of rough, dark gray clay, constantly shifting and molding itself, but armored in jagged plates of rusted, black iron. Its arms were disproportionately long, ending in massive, side-like claws. It had no face, only a smooth, gray dome where a head should be, with a single, glowing vertical red slit that served as an eye. It didn't just exude malice, it radiated a cosmic, consuming emptiness. A rift stalker. The dying warrior's voice echoed in Izuku's mind, filled with despair. A remnant of the dark specter's forces. It has come to finish me. To take the core. The monster, the rift stalker, turned its cyclopean eye toward the warrior and the trembling boy. It let out a sound that defied description, a mechanical grinding mixed with the roar of a dying animal. It stepped into the crater, its heavy footfalls shaking the sand. What is that? Izuku stammered, scrambling backward, his heart hammering so hard he felt dizzy. Is that a villain? A Nomu? What is it? The stalker raised its massive sidearm, pointing it directly at the fallen warrior. Dark, purple energy began to gather at the tip, crackling and hissing as it prepared to fire a lethal blast. Every instinct in Izuku's body, every evolutionary survival mechanism he possessed, screamed at him to run. He was quirkless. He was 14. He had no armor, no weapons, no training. He was nothing but a fragile bag of flesh and bone facing down a cosmic horror that had clearly bested an armored alien warrior. Bakugo was right. He was a pebble. If he stayed, he would die. He stood up. He turned his back on the monster, preparing to sprint up the crater and run for his life. But as he turned, he saw the warrior's face. The alien wasn't looking at the monster. He was looking at Izuku. There was no judgment in his black and red eyes. Only a profound, sorrowful acceptance of his fate. The warrior lowered his trembling hand, resigning himself to death. Izuku stopped. The image of the warrior's defeated eyes overlapped in his mind with the memory of his mother crying, apologizing to him when he was 4. It overlapped with the feeling of absolute helplessness he felt every day of his life. A hero is someone who meddles when they don't need to. All Might had said that in a documentary Izuku had watched 1,000 times. A hero is someone who smiles in the face of fear and says, "I am here." Izuku didn't have a smile. He was terrified out of his mind. But his legs, completely independent of his rational thought, moved. He didn't run away. He spun around, sprinting directly toward the monster. "Child!" And oh! The warrior's voice roared in his mind. Izuku slid past the warrior, scooping up a thick, jagged piece of rusted steel pipe that had been blown into the crater from the beach's trash heaps. He planted his feet directly between the fallen alien and the towering rift stalker. The monster paused, its vertical red eye focusing on the tiny, trembling human holding a piece of garbage. "Leave him alone!" Izuku screamed, his voice cracking, tears streaming down his face. He gripped the pipe so tightly his knuckles turned white. His knees were knocking together so violently he could barely stand, but he didn't yield an inch. The rift stalker let out a low, mocking mechanical growl. It swung its scythe arm down, not even using the energy blast, merely intending to swat the nuisance away. Izuku raised the pipe in a desperate block. The sheer kinetic force of the blow was staggering. The iron scythe struck the rusted pipe, snapping it like a twig. The residual force slammed into Izuku's chest, lifting him off his feet and throwing him backward. He crashed hard into the sand, rolling several times before coming to a stop near the warrior. Pain flared through Izuku's ribs. He coughed violently, tasting copper in his mouth. The world spun. He tried to push himself up, his arms shaking uncontrollably. "Why?" The warrior's telepathic voice was faint, laced with utter shock. "You have no latent energy. You have no structural enhancements. You are fragile. Why do you throw your life away for a stranger from the stars?" "Because," Izuku gasped, spitting blood onto the sand. He forced himself onto one knee, then pushed himself to his feet. He staggered, swaying unsteadily, but he moved back into the monster's path. He raised his bare fists, settling into a clumsy, untrained boxing stance. "Because you looked like you needed saving." The silence that followed was profound. Even the roaring of the ocean seemed to mute. The dying warrior, Oracle of Elter, guardian of the Morphin Grid, stared at the battered, quirkless boy. Oracle had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen the rise and fall of galactic empires. He had fought alongside demigods, warlords, and cosmic entities. He had seen warriors with power capable of shattering planets flee in the face of absolute terror. Yet here, on this primitive, backwater planet, stood a child with absolutely zero inherent power, facing down a creature of the dark dimensions, armed with nothing but bruised knuckles and an unbreakable will. Orikos saw past the frail human shell. Through his connection to the Morphin Grid, an ethereal energy field that connected all life in the universe, he saw the boy's spirit. It was a blazing, incandescent inferno of pure, unadulterated courage. It was the desire to protect others at the absolute cost of oneself. It was the quintessential essence of a Red Ranger. The Rift Stalker, tired of the game, raised both sides. The dark purple energy coalesced rapidly, forming a massive sphere of destructive power. It prepared to obliterate the boy and the Guardian in one strike. "Boy," Oriko's voice echoed, no longer weak, but ringing with absolute, commanding authority. "What is your name?" "I Izuku," he yelled back, not taking his eyes off the monster. "Izuku Midoriya, Izuku Midoriya. My time in this dimension is at an end. But the grid is eternal. And it has chosen its new conduit." "What are you talking about?" Izuku cried out, bracing himself as the monster swung its arms forward to release the blast. "Open your hand, Izuku Midoriya, and accept the legacy." Behind Izuku, Oriko pushed himself up onto one arm. He reached into his chest plate, plunging his gauntlet hand directly into the glowing, exposed mechanics of his armor. With a scream of agony and triumph, he ripped out a device. It was a metallic, rectangular gauntlet piece, sleek and gleaming, with a circular indentation in the center. In his other hand, Oriko held a heavy, gold-rimmed coin. The center of the coin bore the stylized engraving of a prehistoric beast, a Tyrannosaurus rex, and it glowed with a blinding, ruby-red light. With the last vestige of his strength, Oriko thrust his arm forward. The device and the coin dissolved into pure, red energy, shooting past Izuku's shoulder. Before Izuku could react, the red energy slammed into his right wrist. It didn't hurt. Instead, a surge of warmth, like sitting in front of a roaring hearth on a freezing winter day, flooded his veins. He looked down. Fastened securely around his wrist was a heavy, silver and red brace. The Master Morpher, the Rift Stalker, unleashed the purple energy blast. A beam of dark matter the size of a truck hurtled toward Izuku. The coin is within the Morpher. Your will is the catalyst. Speak the word, Izuku. Call upon the power. Oriko commanded. Izuku didn't know what to do. He didn't know how it worked. But the energy pulsing against his wrist felt like it was alive. It felt like it was communicating with him, injecting pure instinct directly into his nervous system. He didn't think. He acted. Izuku crossed his arms over his chest, his right hand gripping the top of the Morpher on his left wrist. The circular indentation flipped open, revealing the glowing red power coin spinning rapidly inside. He threw his right arm forward, the Morpher aimed directly at the incoming blast. He felt a roar building in his chest, a battle cry drawn from the ancient depths of the Morphin grid itself. Tyrannosaurus! Izuku roared. The world erupted in blinding light. A massive, ethereal construct of a roaring Tyrannosaurus Rex composed entirely of red energy burst from the Morpher. It materialized over Izuku, its jaws opening wide, and released a shockwave of raw, morphin energy that collided with the Rift Stalker's blast. The collision shattered the air. The purple energy was instantly overpowered, disintegrating into harmless sparks. The red shockwave continued forward, slamming into the Rift Stalker with the force of a freight train. The monster let out a mechanical shriek of agony as the grid energy tore through its dark matter composition, vaporizing it into ash and sea foam in less than a second. Izuku stood there, his arms still outstretched, panting heavily. The light faded. The monster was gone. He looked at his hands. He looked at the Morpher on his wrist. It was warm to the touch, humming with a low, satisfying vibration. The center of the Morpher closed, the red coin returning to a dormant state. What? Izuku whispered, his mind completely failing to process the impossibility of what had just occurred. What just happened? He remembered the warrior. Izuku spun around and dropped to his knees beside Oriko. The Eltarian warrior was lying flat on his back. The golden mist leaking from his wounds had stopped. Instead, his physical form was beginning to dissolve, turning into thousands of tiny, glowing motes of golden light that drifted upward into the twilight sky. Sir! Sir, hold on! Izuku panicked, trying to touch him, but his hands phased through the dissolving armor. Do not grieve, Izuku Midoriya. Oriko's voice was a gentle whisper in his mind now, fading like an echo. I am returning to the grid. My watch is ended. I don't understand. Izuku cried, tears returning. What did you give me? What was that power? I'm nobody. I don't have a quirk. I'm just Deku. The warrior smiled. It was a faint, peaceful expression. Quirks are mutations of flesh, bound to the physical laws of this single, isolated reality. What you wield now is the Morphin grid, the universal tapestry that binds all dimensions. It does not choose a host based on genetic superiority. It chooses based on the strength of the soul. Oriko's body was almost entirely gone, his face the last thing remaining. You carry the Master Morpher. It contains the legacy of every Red Ranger that has ever protected the multiverse. Their weapons, their armor, their martial knowledge, it is all yours now. But remember this, Izuku. The power does not make you a hero. You were a hero the moment you stepped in front of that beast with nothing but a broken pipe. The power is merely a tool. Use it to protect this world. Led them, Ultimate Red. With those final words, Oriko vanished entirely, a cascade of golden light scattering into the evening wind, leaving Izuku utterly alone in the crater. The silence rushed back in, broken only by the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the shore. The alien spacecraft behind him gave one final, dying hiss as its systems shut down completely, its red lights fading to black. Izuku knelt in the sand for a long time. His body ached. His ribs throbbed. He tasted blood. But inside him, coursing through his veins, was a sensation he had never felt in his entire life. He felt strong, he felt whole. He looked down at the master morpher on his wrist. He ran his trembling fingers over the silver casing. Suddenly, a distinct, computerized chime emanated from the device. A small holographic projection shot upward from the face of the morpher, forming a floating, crystalline grid pattern in the air before Izuku's eyes. A synthetic, yet oddly warm and authoritative voice spoke directly into his ear, sounding like a high-tech AI system booting up from a long slumber. Biometric scan complete. Genetic anomaly, quirk factor absent. Soul integrity, 100%. Synaptic synchronization, successful. Izuku stared in shock. "Hello?" he whispered. The hologram pulsed in time with the voice. Grid connection established. Dimensional archives unlocking. Combat protocols initializing. The voice paused for a fraction of a second, and when it spoke again, it sounded less like a machine, and more like a mentor greeting a long-lost student. "Welcome, Izuku Midoriya. Welcome, Ultimate Red. The human body is an incredibly resilient machine, capable of adapting to immense stress, repairing micro-tears and muscle fiber, and pushing past psychological barriers when survival is on the line. But the human body was never designed to act as a metaphysical lightning rod for the infinite, pan-dimensional energy field known as the Morphin Grid. This was the first, and most painful, lesson Izuku Midoriya learned on the morning after the meteor crash. He had woken up in his bed, staring at the ceiling, half convinced that the dying alien, the monstrous Rift Stalker, and the glowing silver brace on his left wrist had all been a fever dream brought on by the trauma of Bakugo's bullying. But when he shifted his arm, the heavy, metallic weight of the master morpher pulled against the sheets. It was real. "Good morning, Izuku Midoriya." The voice of the AI had chimed directly into his mind, its tone a perfect blend of synthetic precision and warm, mentoring patience. Izuku had learned that the AI was a localized consciousness of the grid itself, implanted into the morpher to guide the Ultimate Red. Izuku had decided to call it Aegis. "Are you prepared to initiate combat trials?" Aegis had asked on that first morning. Izuku had practically vibrated with excitement. He had sneaked out to a secluded, empty lot, posed dramatically, and yelled, "Tyrannosaurus!" Just as he had done on the beach. Nothing happened. Instead of blinding light and red armor, a jolt of agonizing, static electricity had shot up his arm, dropping him to his knees as his muscles violently spasmed. He had thrown up his breakfast into the weeds, his entire nervous system feeling like it had been dipped in liquid fire. Error. Somatic rejection. Aegis had calmly informed him as Izuku gasped for air on the dirt. To channel the Morphin Grid, the host vessel must be capable of withstanding the bioelectrical feedback. Currently, your physical resilience, muscular density, and cardiovascular endurance are at 4% of the required baseline for a sustained, low-level morph. If you had successfully transformed just now, the biokinetic feedback would have pulverized your skeletal structure into fine dust. Izuku had stared at the morpher, horrified. "So, I have the power of the universe on my wrist, and I can't use it because I'm too weak?" "Correction," Aegis had replied. "You cannot use it yet. The grid does not make mistakes, Izuku. It chose your heart. Now we must forge your body to match it. You have 10 months until the UA, high school entrance exams. We have work to do," and so, the 10 months of hell began. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park transformed from Izuku's personal purgatory into his crucible. He didn't just clean the beach, he warred against it. Guided by Aegis's relentless, hyper-optimized training regimens, Izuku pushed his body to the absolute brink of human endurance. Without a quirk to aid him, every rusted refrigerator hauled, every waterlogged mattress dragged, and every compressed junk car pushed through the deep, resistant sand was a testament to his sheer willpower. Aegis monitored his vitals, adjusting his caloric intake, calculating optimal sleep cycles, and forcing him to study the martial arts stances of the ancient warriors whose power he would soon wield. As he worked, Aegis would project holographic archives from the Master Morpher into Izuku's vision. While he lifted engine blocks, Izuku watched the combat logs of Jason Lee Scott, learning the brutal, crushing efficiency of the Tyrannosaurus style. While he sprinted through the surf with tires tied to his waist, He analyzed the lightning-fast, acrobatic swordplay of Jaden Shiba, the samurai ranger. He watched Endress of KO-35 navigate space combat, and he studied the mystic martial arts of Nick Russell. His mind became a sponge, absorbing the tactical brilliance, the leadership, and the unbreakable codes of the Red Rangers. Month by month, the boy who had cowered beneath Bakugo's explosive temper began to fade. The soft, round edges of Izuku's face sharpened. His shoulders broadened. His chest and arms packed on dense, functional muscle forged through grueling, unglamorous labor. His hands, once soft and trembling, became heavily calloused and steady. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, Izuku stood at the edge of Dagoba Beach. The sun was just rising, casting a brilliant, golden light over the coastline. The trash was gone. Every single piece of it. For the first time in a decade, the waves crashed against pristine, sparkling white sand. The ocean breeze smelled of salt and freedom, rather than rust and decay. Izuku stood atop the seawall, wearing his middle school uniform, breathing in the crisp morning air. Baseline physical conditioning, 100%. Aegis chimed in his mind. Somatic synchronization stabilized. You are ready, Izuku. Izuku looked down at his left wrist. The Master Morpher was hidden securely beneath the sleeve of his black uniform jacket. He clenched his fist, feeling the immense, humming potential resting against his skin. He didn't feel the crushing anxiety that used to paralyze him. He felt focused. He felt centered. Let's go, Izuku whispered. The towering, H-shaped glass building of UA High School was a monument to heroism. As Izuku walked up the wide, paved pathway leading to the main entrance, he couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of awe. This was it. The proving ground. Hundreds of students were swarming toward the gates, a sea of diverse, aspiring heroes chattering nervously about the practical exams. Stupid Deku. The abrasive, gravelly voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife. Izuku stopped and turned. Katsuki Bakugo was walking up the path, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his posture slouching with a forced, aggressive casualness. His crimson eyes locked onto Izuku, narrowing in a mix of annoyance and disdain. Get out of my way before I set you on fire, Bakugo growled, not slowing his pace. A year ago, Izuku would have flinched, stammered an apology, and practically tripped over himself to clear the path. But today, the downloaded memories of 100 galactic battles rested in his mind. He had seen holographic simulations of monsters that could eat planets. A teenager with explosions in his palms simply didn't inspire the same world-ending terror anymore. Izuku didn't flinch. He simply took a calm, measured step to the side, maintaining steady eye contact with Bakugo. Good morning, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice even and devoid of its usual tremor. Good luck on the exam. Bakugo stopped. He blinked, clearly thrown off by the lack of fear in Izuku's eyes. He looked Izuku up and down, perhaps subconsciously noting the broader shoulders and the confident posture beneath the uniform. A scowl twisted Bakugo's features, a spark popping off his thumb. Don't talk to me like we're equals, you quirkless nobody, Bakugo spat. You're gonna die in there. He shoved past Izuku, storming toward the entrance. Izuku watched him go, feeling a strange sense of pity. He only understands power as dominance, Izuku thought, echoing a sentiment Aegis had shared about a villain named Lord Zed. But true power is discipline. Taking a deep breath, Izuku turned to continue his walk, only to realize he had lost his footing on the edge of the pavement. His worn red sneaker caught on a loose stone, and he pitched forward, gravity taking hold. Ah, great. All that physical training and I still trip over my own feet, he thought, bracing for impact. Before his face could meet the concrete, he felt a sudden lightness. The sensation of falling vanished. Izuku opened his eyes to find himself floating 3 inches above the ground, his arms flailing slightly in zero gravity. Are you okay? A cheerful voice asked. Izuku was gently rotated and placed back onto his feet. Standing before him was a girl with a bright, round face, large warm brown eyes, and short auburn hair. She was smiling kindly, her fingers pressed together. I used my quirk on you, sorry for not asking first, she said, a slight blush dusting her cheeks. But it would be bad luck if you fell right before the exam, wouldn't it? Izuku's heart did a sudden, violent backflip. A girl. A girl was talking to him. And she had smiled at him. Despite all the mental conditioning and alien combat protocols, he was still a 14-year-old boy who had never successfully spoken to a girl outside of his mother. Yeah? I mean, thank you. I'm completely fine. You saved me, haha. Izuku stammered, his face turning the color of a ripe tomato, his arms moving in rigid, robotic gestures. I'm Ochiko Uraraka, she said, oblivious to his internal panic. You seem really nervous. Let's do our best, okay? See ya inside. She gave him a cheerful wave and jogged off toward the auditorium. Izuku stood frozen for a solid 10 seconds, his hands clutching his chest, heart rate spiking to 140 beats per minute. Aegis noted dryly in his mind. Are you under the influence of a biological toxin, Izuku? No, Aegis. Izuku thought frantically. I just talked to a girl. Fascinating. The human reproductive instinct overrides even the anticipation of combat. I will archive this data. Please proceed to orientation. The auditorium was massive, designed like a stadium to hold thousands of applicants. Izuku found his seat, sandwiched uncomfortably close to Bakugo, who glared at the stage with intense concentration. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight snapped onto the central podium. What's up, UA candidates? Screamed a tall, lean man with blonde hair styled into a towering, impossible spike. He wore a leather jacket and custom directional speakers around his neck. Everybody say hey. Silence echoed through the massive room. Wow, what a refined response. The voice hero, Present Mike, recovered smoothly. Then I'll quickly present to you the rundown on the practical exam. Are you ready? Yeah. More silence. Izuku winced slightly, feeling bad for the pro hero, but quickly opened the pamphlet that had been handed out at the door. Present Mike explained the mechanics of the test. It was a mock urban battle. The applicants would be divided into specific battle centers, massive artificial cities, where they would have 10 minutes to destroy robotic villains to earn points. There were 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point robots, each varying in difficulty. Excuse me. May I ask a question? A tall, broad-shouldered boy with glasses and an incredibly rigid posture shot up from his seat, raising his hand perfectly straight. A spotlight hit him. On the printout, there are 4 types of villains. If this is a misprint, UA, the top hero agency of Japan, should be ashamed of that foolish mistake. The boy then spun around, pointing a stiff finger directly at Izuku. And you, in the back. You've been muttering this entire time. It's distracting. If you're here on a pleasure trip, then you should leave immediately. Izuku slapped a hand over his mouth. He hadn't realized he had been verbally muttering his analysis of the robot point system, calculating the most efficient way to utilize his ranger forms without draining the Master Morpher's reserves. Okay, examinee number 7111. Present Mike intervened. Thanks for the great message. The 4th villain type is worth 0 points. That guy's an obstacle, so to speak. There's one in every battle center. It's not impossible to defeat, but there's no reason to. I recommend you listeners try to avoid it. Izuku absorbed the information. A 0-pointer. A massive obstacle designed to test situational awareness and risk assessment. Got it. Tactical analysis. Aegis chimed in. The objective is localized destruction of mechanical units. Recommended form, Mighty Morphin Red. The Tyrannosaurus combat style prioritizes overwhelming offensive strikes and armor penetration, ideal for dismantling metallic chassis. Agreed, Izuku thought, a slow, determined smile creeping onto his face. Battle Center B was a jaw-dropping feat of engineering. It was a fully realized, multi-block cityscape enclosed within towering concrete walls. Skyscrapers, roads, traffic lights, and alleys. It looked exactly like a slice of downtown Tokyo, completely devoid of civilian life. Izuku stood near the middle of the massive crowd of teenagers gathered before the colossal, closed metal gates. He wore a simple, dark green tracksuit. He looked around, spotting the girl from earlier, Uraraka, taking deep breaths near the front. He saw the strict boy with the glasses stretching his calves. Everyone was buzzing with nervous energy, showing off their quirks to psych themselves out. Sparks flew, skin hardened into steel, and extra limbs flexed. Izuku simply rolled up the left sleeve of his track jacket, exposing the Master Morpher. The silver and red device gleamed in the sunlight. He rested his right hand over it, his thumb hovering near the activation release. "Hey, are you looking at that girl again?" A voice sneered beside him. It was the strict boy with glasses, glaring down at Izuku. "Are you going to interfere with her concentration?" "And no. Not at all." Izuku waved his hands defensively. "Right, let's start." Present Mix's voice boomed from hidden speakers above the gates. The massive metal doors began to groan, slowly grinding open to reveal the sprawling Foe City. The crowd of applicants hesitated, waiting for a starting gun or a countdown. "What's the matter?" Present Mike yelled. "There are no countdowns in real battles. Run, run, run!" While the rest of the applicants blinked in confusion, Izuku didn't waste a microsecond. The combat instincts drilled into him by the grid seized control. He launched himself forward, sprinting through the opening gates before anyone else had even twitched a muscle. He was 50 meters down the main street, completely alone in the concrete canyon, when the mechanical whirring began. From an intersecting alleyway, 3 massive, olive-green robots rolled out on treads. They had blocky, humanoid upper bodies, single glowing red optics, and thick metal arms. The painted number 1 on their chassis identified them. Target acquired, the lead robot buzzed in a robotic monotone. Commencing elimination. Izuku didn't slow down. He accelerated, sprinting directly toward the machines. "Grid access granted," Aegis whispered in his mind. Izuku leaped into the air, bringing his right hand down onto the Master Morpher. The circular port snapped open, and the red power coin locked into place. "It's morphin' time!" Izuku roared, his voice echoing off the buildings. "Tyrannosaurus!" To the applicants who were just now rushing through the gates behind him, the sight was incomprehensible. A pillar of blinding, crimson light erupted from the sky, crashing down directly onto the green-haired boy in midair. The sound was like a thunderclap mixed with the roar of a prehistoric beast. A massive, translucent red hologram of a T-Rex materialized around him, roaring silently before snapping its jaws shut, compressing the light into his body. The light shattered like glass. Izuku hit the asphalt, no longer wearing a track suit. He was clad in a skin-tight, hyper-durable spandex-like material of brilliant, eye-searing red. His chest, shoulders, and boots were accented with stark, diamond-white patterns. A golden belt wrapped around his waist, the center buckle housing his glowing red power coin. On his left hip rested a stylized, futuristic blaster in a holster. But it was the helmet that drew the eye. It was sleek, aerodynamic, and aggressive, molded into the stylized visage of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, complete with silver teeth framing the black, one-way visor. Izuku landed in a deep, coiled crouch. Inside the helmet, a high-tech heads-up display, HUD, flared to life. Targeting reticles locked onto the 3 robots in front of him. Heart rate, adrenaline levels, and grid energy reserves blinked in crisp blue text at the edge of his vision. The applicants at the gate skidded to a halt, staring in absolute shock. What kind of quirk is that?" A student with spiky red hair yelled. "He summoned armor out of light." Another gasped. The robots didn't care about the spectacle. The lead one-pointer raised its heavy metal fist and charged, throwing a devastating punch aimed right at Izuku's helmet. Izuku didn't think about his next move. His body simply knew it. The martial arts mastery of Jason Lee Scott surged through his nervous system. He slipped the punch with terrifying speed, pivoting on his heel. He grabbed the robot's extended arm, using its own momentum against it, and delivered a devastating, spinning back kick directly into the machine's knee joint. The impact sounded like a cannon firing. The robot's leg snapped backward, metal shearing and wires sparking. As the machine crumpled, Izuku sprang off the falling chassis, launching himself toward the other 2. "Power sword!" Izuku shouted. He reached over his shoulder, grasping the hilt of a weapon that materialized from pure red energy. He drew it forward, a massive, double-edged broadsword gleaming with silver steel and a crimson hilt. The blade crackled with concentrated kinetic energy. Izuku landed gracefully between the 2 remaining one-pointers. In a blur of motion, he swung the power sword in a wide, horizontal arc. The blade didn't just cut the metal, it vaporized the molecular bonds at the point of impact. The top halves of both robots slid off their lower chassis with a sickening metal screech, crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks and smoke. 3 points, Izuku said, his voice modulated and slightly deepened by the helmet's speakers. He swung the sword, flicking off imaginary debris, and rested it on his shoulder. He looked back at the stunned applicants. "What are you waiting for?" he yelled. "The clock is ticking." That broke the spell. The crowd roared, their competitive spirits igniting, and they surged into the city. For the next 8 minutes, Battle Center B became Izuku Midoriya's personal stage. He moved through the faux city like a red hurricane. The physical training he had endured on Dagobah allowed him to channel the suit's enhanced strength and speed flawlessly. He leaped over 2-story buildings, vaulting from fire escapes to lampposts with acrobatic grace. When he encountered a group of 2-pointers, sleek, scorpion-like machines, he holstered the power sword, drew his blade blaster from his hip, and converted it to blade mode. He engaged them in dizzying close-quarters combat, parrying mechanical stingers and slicing through visual sensors with surgical precision. When a massive 3-pointer, a heavily armored, tank-like robot, cornered a student with a tail quirk, Izuku dropped from the sky. He landed directly on the tank's turret, driving the power sword straight down through the thick armor plating into its central processor, disabling it instantly. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked the tailed student, offering a red-gloved hand. "Why, yeah. Thanks, man. Your armor quirk is insane," the boy panted, taking the hand. Izuku just nodded behind the visor and leaped away, his HUD tracking a new cluster of targets 3 streets over. High above the battle centers, in a darkened, soundproof observation room, the faculty of UA High watched the exams unfold on a massive wall of monitors. "This year's crop looks promising," commented Midnight, the R-rated hero, crossing her arms. "Look at that boy with the explosions. He's ruthless. Excellent combat instincts." "Indeed," agreed Snipe, adjusting his cowboy hat. "But he lacks spatial awareness. He's destroying robots, but he's catching other students in the collateral blast radius." Sitting in the center of the room, sipping tea from a delicate porcelain cup, was Nizu, the principal of UA, a creature that looked like a mix between a bear, a mouse, and a dog. While raw destructive power is impressive, true heroism requires a balance of offense and situational control. "Who has caught your eye, Aizawa?" Shota Aizawa, the Erasure hero, leaned forward in his sleeping bag, his bloodshot eyes fixed intently on monitor B4. "Examinee 7111. Midoriya." The other teachers shifted their attention to the screen. It showed the Red Ranger sprinting up the side of a falling building, using the falling rubble as stepping stones, before launching himself into the air and cleaving a 3-pointer in twain. "My goodness," President Mike whistled. "That listener is rocking a wicked transformation quirk. The strength enhancement is off the charts, and he materialized that sword out of thin air." "It's not just a quirk," Aizawa murmured, his eyes narrowing. "Look at his movements. That isn't the brawling of an untrained teenager. There is no wasted motion. His center of gravity is perfect. Every strike is calculated to hit a structural weak point. He fights like a veteran martial artist who has been to war." Standing in the back of the room, hidden in the shadows, was a massive, skeletal figure in a baggy yellow suit. Tashinori Yagi, better known to the world as All Might, gripped the railing so tightly the metal groaned. His sunken blue eyes were fixed on the red warrior on the screen. "What is that power?" All Might thought, a cold sweat breaking out on his neck. "It isn't a quirk. I can feel it from here. It doesn't have the biological signature of a quirk. It feels ancient. Boundless. It reminds me of One for All, yet it is completely different. Where did this boy come from?" "Let's test their true mettle," Nisa said with a cheerful, sadistic tone. He reached forward and flipped a red switch on the control console. "Let's see how they handle absolute despair." With 2 minutes left on the clock, Izuku had accumulated over 60 points. He was breathing heavily, sweat stinging his eyes inside the helmet. The physical toll of wearing the grid energy was beginning to manifest. His muscles ached, and a dull, throbbing headache pulsed behind his temples. "Warning! Grid energy reserves dropping. Core temperature of host vessel elevating," Aegis cautioned. "I know, Aegis," Izuku muttered, leaning against a brick wall to catch his breath. Just a few more minutes. I think I have enough points to pass. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet violently shuddered. It wasn't a minor tremor. The entire artificial city rocked as if hit by an 8.0 magnitude earthquake. Buildings swayed, glass shattered, and the asphalt cracked open. A shadow fell over the street. Izuku looked up, and his blood ran cold beneath the red armor. Bursting from the center of the city, tearing through skyscrapers as if they were made of cardboard, was the zero-pointer. It wasn't a robot, it was a walking skyscraper. Its colossal, treaded feet crushed entire streets. Its massive, humanoid upper body blocked out the sun. A single, glowing red eye the size of a bus scanned the ground below, and a deafening, mechanical roar echoed across the battle center. Panic erupted. The applicants, who had been bravely fighting seconds ago, broke and ran. It's a monster! Run away! We only have 2 minutes left. Don't fight that thing. Izuku stood frozen. His rational mind, fueled by the exam pamphlet, told him to run. It was worth 0 points. There was no tactical advantage to fighting it. The smart play was to retreat and secure his current score. He turned around, preparing to sprint toward the entrance gates with the rest of the crowd. Ow! Help! The faint cry cut through the sounds of destruction. Izuku stopped dead. He spun around, his enhanced optical sensors zooming in on the source of the voice. Near the base of the colossal zero-pointer, trapped beneath a massive slab of concrete rubble that had fallen from a destroyed building, was the brown-haired girl. Uraraka. Her leg was pinned. She was desperately trying to push the concrete off, but it was too heavy, and the zero-pointer's massive, tank-like foot was slowly crushing its way down the street, heading directly toward her. Izuku's heart stopped. He didn't think about the points. He didn't think about the exam. The image of the dying Altarian warrior on the beach flashed in his mind. The power does not make you a hero. You were a hero the moment you stepped in front of that beast. Izuku took a step forward. Izuku! Aegis's voice was sharp, urgent. Mighty Morphin Red lacks the necessary vertical mobility and localized concussive force to bypass the zero-pointer's armor before it crushes the civilian. You will not reach her in time on foot. Then give me something that can. Izuku roared. Accessing grid archives. Shifting power matrix to sector KO35. Initiating form change. Izuku reached to his belt, grabbing the master morpher. He didn't unmorph. He simply twisted the outer dial of the morpher. The red power coin flipped over, locking a new, stylized symbol into place. A soaring spaceship icon. Let's rock it! Izuku screamed. A blinding flash of golden light consumed him, overriding the red energy. In the monitor room, the teachers gasped as the boy on the screen underwent a sudden, violent transformation. The light faded. Izuku's armor had changed. The diamond patterns were gone, replaced by a sleek, space-age suit of solid crimson with a stark white collar and chest insignia. His helmet was entirely different, a smooth, aerodynamic dome with a V-shaped black visor, and glowing, golden circuitry lining the faceplate. He was now the Power Rangers and Space Red Ranger. Galaxy Glider, initiate! Izuku commanded, his voice now crisp and echoing with a slight synthesized hum. High above the battle center, a rift in the sky opened. A sleek, red and silver surfboard-like vehicle, crackling with rocket propulsion energy, shot down from the heavens. It leveled out, hovering inches above the asphalt right in front of Izuku. Izuku leaped onto the Galaxy Glider. His boots magnetically locked into the footpads. He leaned forward. With a deafening sonic boom, the glider shot forward, accelerating from 0 to Mach 1 in a fraction of a second. Izuku tore down the street, a red blur weaving through the terrified, fleeing students, leaving a trail of plasma exhaust in his wake. He reached Uraraka in less than 2 seconds. He didn't slow down. As he flew past her, he drew his new weapon from his belt, an intricately designed sidearm known as the Astro Blaster. Without looking, he fired a concentrated beam of yellow plasma at the concrete slab pinning her leg. The slab shattered into dust, freeing her. Get up and run! Izuku's voice boomed from the glider as he shot past her. Uraraka stared in shock, scrambling to her feet as the red comet soared upward. Izuku pulled back on the nose of the glider, ascending vertically up the leg of the colossal zero-pointer. The G-force pressed him heavily into the board, but the suit compensated. He flew straight up the machine's torso, dodging a massive swipe from its tree-trunk-sized arm. He reached eye level with the machine, hovering in midair right in front of its massive red optic sensor. Aegis! Reroute all auxiliary power to the primary weapon! Izuku yelled over the roar of the wind and the robot's engine. Rerouting! Spiral saber unlocked. Izuku reached into subspace, pulling out his signature weapon for this form. It was a vicious, high-tech short sword, but the blade wasn't flat. It was a spiraling, drill-like cone of silver metal, revving and spinning with devastating kinetic energy. Let's see how tough your armor really is, Izuku yelled. He accelerated the galaxy glider forward, flying directly at the zero-pointer's face. He held the spiral saber out in front of him, the drill blades spinning so fast it created a sonic whine that shattered the remaining glass in the buildings below. The zero-pointer raised its hand to swat him out of the air. Izuku didn't dodge. Spiral strike. He spun his body along with the glider, turning himself into a living, red missile. He struck the center of the zero-pointer's armored hand. The spiral saber bored through the thick, reinforced steel plating like a hot knife through butter. Izuku flew straight through the robot's hand, emerging on the other side in a shower of sparks and hydraulic fluid. He didn't stop. He carried his momentum forward, plunging the spinning drill blade directly into the center of the zero-pointer's glowing red eye. The sound of shearing metal was deafening. The spiral saber tore through the optical sensor, burrowing deep into the machine's central processing core. Izuku unleashed a massive pulse of red grid energy through the blade directly into the robot's brain. The zero-pointer froze. Its mechanical groans turned into a high-pitched, failing whine. The red light in its eye flickered and died. Internal explosions ripped through its chassis, blowing out its joints and exhaust ports. Izuku pulled his sword free, banking the glider sharply to the right just as the colossal machine began to fall backward. It crashed onto the empty streets with the force of a meteor, sending a massive cloud of dust and debris billowing into the sky, obscuring the sun. Silence descended upon Battle Center B. High above, Izuku hovered on the galaxy glider, looking down at the destroyed Titan. He took a deep, shaky breath. Time's up. Present Mick's voice echoed across the intercom. The adrenaline vanished, replaced instantly by the crushing, inevitable toll of the grid's bioelectrical feedback. Izuku's vision blurred. The muscles in his legs seized, and a sharp, blinding pain shot through his nervous system. He lost his grip on the grid connection. The galaxy glider dissolved into light beneath his feet. The red armor shattered, retreating back into the Master Morpher. Izuku was suddenly just a 14-year-old boy in a green tracksuit, plummeting toward the ground from 100 feet in the air. Oh, right, Izuku thought, the wind roaring in his ears as the ground rushed up to meet him. Gravity. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the impact. Release. A sharp slap on his cheek, followed by the sudden, jarring return of his own weight, snapped his eyes open. He hit the ground, rolling across the asphalt, groaning as his bruised body protested. He looked up. Uraraka was standing a few feet away, panting heavily, her fingers pressed together. She had slapped him mid-fall, making him weightless just long enough to break his descent, before releasing the quirk so he wouldn't float away. She looked at him, her eyes wide with absolute awe. You saved me, she whispered. That was amazing. Izuku tried to smile, tried to say you're welcome, but the physical exhaustion finally overwhelmed him. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed onto the cracked asphalt, unconscious. The other students slowly gathered around, staring at the unconscious, green-haired boy, and then up at the smoking, headless ruins of the zero-pointer. Who is this guy? The boy with glasses murmured, adjusting his spectacles with a trembling hand. He threw away his chance to score points just to save her. He possesses a power I've never seen, and a spirit that puts us all to shame. He is the truest hero among us. In the monitor room, the silence was equally profound. Aizawa unzipped his sleeping bag and stood up, a rare, genuine smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Well, it seems we have an interesting one this year. All Might remained in the shadows. He stared at the screen showing the unconscious Izuku Midoriya being attended to by Recovery Girl. He placed a massive hand over his own heart, feeling the embers of one for all burning within him. He leaped without hesitation. All Might thought, his heart swelling with a mixture of immense pride and deep curiosity. He didn't just display power, he displayed the heart of a true savior. Izuku Midoriya, what is the source of your crimson light? The symbol of peace turned and walked out of the monitor room, his mind made up. He needed to meet this boy. The world was changing, and All Might had a feeling that the epicenter of that change was wearing a silver brace on his left wrist. The human body is an exquisite, fragile ledger. It keeps a meticulous, agonizing record of every trauma, every exertion, and every limit violently bypassed. For Izuku Midoriya, that ledger was currently written in the language of profound, paralyzing soreness. He awoke 3 days after the UA entrance exam feeling as though he had been used as a chew toy by a mechanized Godzilla. Which, given his encounter with the zero-pointer, wasn't entirely far from the truth. Every muscle fiber in his back screamed in protest as he attempted to sit up in bed. His joints popped like bubble wrap. The bioelectrical feedback from channeling both the mighty Morphin and in-space Red Ranger power matrices within a 10-minute window had nearly fried his central nervous system. Recovery Girl's healing quirk had repaired the micro-tears in his muscles and the hairline fractures in his forearms, but it had left him utterly drained of stamina. Izuku groaned, swinging his legs over the edge of his bed. He looked down at his left wrist. The Master Morpher rested against his skin, its silver casing cool and dormant. "Good morning, Izuku!" Aegis's synthetic, mentoring voice hummed in his mind, the neural link activating the moment he was conscious. "Somatic repair is at 92%. However, I strongly advise against channeling anything above a Class 3 grid manifestation for the next 48 hours. The Galaxy Glider maneuver severely depleted your localized energy reserves." "Good morning, Aegis," Izuku whispered, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, I feel like a steamroller ran over me. But we did it. We stopped it. You protected a civilian at great personal risk. It was tactically unsound, logically flawed, and entirely within the parameters of a Red Ranger's duty. I have archived the combat data. Your transition between the Tyrannosaurus and Astro power sets was adequate. Though your landing requires significant refinement." Izuku managed a weak chuckle. "I'll work on the superhero landing." "Izuku, are you awake?" His bedroom door swung open, and his mother, Inko Midoriya, stood there. She looked paler than usual, her green hair slightly disheveled, clutching a plain white envelope sealed with a thick, red wax stamp bearing the UA crest. Her hands were trembling violently. "Mom? What is it?" Izuku asked, his heart suddenly leaping into his throat, temporarily overriding his physical pain. It came," she whispered, tears already pooling in her eyes. "The letter. It just arrived." Izuku stood up, his legs shaking slightly, and walked over to take the envelope. It was surprisingly heavy. He walked to his desk, took a deep breath, and tore the seal. Instead of a piece of paper, a small, metallic disc slipped out, clattering onto the wooden surface of the desk. Izuku and Inko stared at it for a second before the disc whirred to life. A holographic projection shot upward, illuminating the dim bedroom with a bright, blue light. "I am here as a projection," the booming, larger-than-life voice of All Might echoed through the room. The symbol of peace was wearing a sharp yellow suit, pointing directly at the camera with his trademark, blinding smile. Inko gasped, covering her mouth. Izuku's jaw dropped. "All Might? Why is All Might on the UA acceptance letter? Young Midoriya?" All Might's projection continued, crossing his arms. "You must be wondering why I am the one delivering this message. The truth is, I have recently joined the faculty at UA High School, and let me tell you, I was watching your performance in the practical exam very closely." The hologram shifted, showing a smaller screen in the corner. It was footage of Izuku, clad in the sleek, crimson and space armor, surfing the Galaxy Glider straight up the colossal zero-pointer, his spiral saber tearing through its ocular sensor. "You scored 63 villain points," All Might said, his tone turning serious. "A highly respectable score that would have easily secured your passage. But, the entrance exam was not graded solely on villain points." The screen shifted again, showing the brown-haired girl, Uraraka, in a different room, speaking to present mic. "Excuse me," the holographic Uraraka said, looking nervous. "That boy with the green hair and the red armor, he saved me. He gave up his chance to get more points just to help me. If it's possible, can I give him some of my points? Izuku felt a lump form in his throat. She had gone out of her way to try and help him. A hero course that rejects those who do the right thing when the chips are down is no hero course at all. All Might boomed. This is a job that requires risking one's life to put others first. Therefore, we have rescue points. A panel of judges watches the exams and awards points for selfless acts. Izuku Midoriya, 60 rescue points. The projection displayed his final score, 123 points. First place. You passed with flying colors, young man, All Might said, leaning closer to the camera, his blue eyes seeming to pierce right through the hologram. Your quirk is magnificent, but more importantly your heart is true. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram fizzled out, leaving the room in stunned silence. Inko burst into tears, throwing her arms around Izuku, burying her face in his chest. Izuku! Oh, Izuku, I'm so proud of you! You did it! You really did it! Izuku hugged his mother back, burying his face in her shoulder, letting his own tears fall. He had done it. He was going to UA, but as he looked over her shoulder at the dark screen of the projector, a knot of anxiety twisted in his stomach. All Might had specifically mentioned his quirk. Aegis, Izuku thought, his mind racing. UA thinks the grid is my quirk. The government registries still have me listed as quirkless. I need to update my registry before school starts, but we can't tell them the truth. If the world finds out about a multidimensional energy field, villains won't just try to steal it, governments will try to weaponize it. Agreed, Aegis replied coolly. The existence of the Morphin Grid must remain a closely guarded secret. We must construct a plausible biological/technological cover story that fits within the parameters of this society's quirk framework. Izuku sat at his desk, pulling out a fresh, unburned notebook. Okay. Let's build a quirk. For the next 2 hours, Izuku and Aegis brainstormed. They settled on a name, Morphin Arsenal. The official description he submitted to the quirk registry was meticulously crafted. He claimed his quirk was a late-blooming, rare emitter/transformation hybrid. The premise was that his body passively generated an unstable, high-frequency bioenergy. However, he could not project or use this energy on its own without it causing massive cellular damage. To utilize his quirk, he required a specialized support item, the Master Morpher, which he claimed was a family heirloom heavily modified by a private support company. The Morpher acted as a conduit, taking his raw bioenergy and refracting it into highly specific, solid light armor and weapon constructs. This explains why I have different suits, Izuku muttered, tapping his pencil. Each power coin is just a different programmed frequency in the support item. It explains the weapons, the physical enhancements, and the fact that I couldn't use it until my body was strong enough to produce the baseline energy. It is a logical fabrication, Aegis confirmed. However, it presents a tactical vulnerability. If a hero or villain possesses a quirk that nullifies biological abilities, they may attempt to use it on you. Since you draw power from the grid, not biology, their nullification will fail. This discrepancy could expose our deception. Izuku frowned. If someone tries to erase my quirk, I'll just have to manually drop the transformation and act like it worked. I'll have to rely on my base martial arts until I can get out of their line of sight. A dangerous gambit, Izuku. But acceptable. Your training has prepared you to fight unmorphed. April arrived with the blossoming of cherry trees and a crisp, cool breeze. Izuku stood before the massive, towering doors of Class 1A, adjusting the collar of his U uniform. The gray blazer and red tie felt strange compared to the worn middle school gakurin he was used to. Beneath his long left sleeve, the Master Morpher sat cold and ready against his wrist. He took a deep breath, steeling his nerves, and slid the massive door open. The first thing he saw was Katsuki Bakugo, his feet propped up disrespectfully on his desk, yelling at the tall, glasses-wearing boy from the entrance exam. Don't put your feet on the desk. The boy chopped the air rigidly. Don't you think that's disrespectful to your classmates, and to the UA alumni? No, I don't, you stuck-up extra. Bakugo sneered, small pops of smoke escaping his palms. What crappy junior high did you go to anyway? I attended semi-private academy. My name is Tenya Ida. Sama? So you're a damn elite? I'll have fun crushing you. Izuku sighed internally. Some things never change. He stepped fully into the room. Ida immediately stopped arguing with Bakugo and marched over to Izuku, his posture perfectly straight. Good morning, Ida announced loudly, bowing at a perfect 90-degree angle. I am Tenya Ida. I must apologize to you. During the entrance exam, I misjudged you completely. I did not realize you had perceived the hidden criteria of the practical test. You acted like a true hero, while I only thought of myself. Furthermore, the power of your armor. It was spectacular. Oh, thanks. Izuku stammered, waving his hands. I'm Izuku Midoriya. And really, I didn't figure anything out. I just moved. I couldn't let her get crushed. Oh. That curly hair. You're the red armor boy. Izuku turned to see Achiko Uraraka beaming at him, stepping into the classroom. Her face lit up. I'm so glad you passed. That move you did on the giant robot, with the flying board and the drill sword, it was like something out of a sci-fi movie. It was so cool. Izuku felt his face heat up again. Thank you. It was thanks to you that I didn't become a pancake on the pavement. Bakugo, sitting near the back, narrowed his eyes. He glared at Izuku, his teeth grinding together. Deku. How the hell did he get in here? What the hell was that trick he pulled at the exam? A quirk? No way, he's quirkless. He has to be cheating. If you're just here to make friends, you can pack up your things and leave. The voice was tired, monotone, and completely devoid of warmth. Izuku, Ida, and Uraraka turned toward the hallway. Lying on the floor, encased in a bright yellow sleeping bag that made him look like a giant, scruffy caterpillar, was a man. He unzipped the bag and stood up, revealing messy, shoulder-length black hair, severe dark bags under his eyes, and a tangled gray scarf wrapped around his neck. He pulled out a pouch of jelly liquid and slurped it lazily. It took you lot 8 seconds to quiet down, the man said, stepping up to the teacher's podium. Time is limited. You kids are not rational enough. Izuku's encyclopedic knowledge of heroes immediately recognized the man. The Erasure hero, Eraserhead. He's an underground hero. He avoids the media. And he's our homeroom teacher? I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you. He reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out a stack of blue and white UA gym uniforms. It's sudden, but put these on and head out to the PE grounds. The locker room was filled with the boisterous energy of teenage boys sizing each other up. Man, this uniform is tight, complained a boy with spiky blonde hair and a black lightning bolt streak, Denki Kaminari. It highlights a manly physique, declared Eijiro Kurishima, a boy with bright red, spiky hair. He flexed his arms. He then looked over at Izuku, who had just taken off his uniform shirt. Kurishima's eyes widened. Whoa, Midoriya! You're shredded, bro. The locker room went somewhat quiet as a few boys turned to look. Izuku blushed, quickly pulling the blue pea shirt over his head, but not before they saw his back and shoulders. 10 months of hauling industrial waste on a beach, combined with Aegis's brutal physical conditioning, had packed dense, highly defined muscle onto his frame. But what drew their attention were the faint, silvery scars crisscrossing his shoulders and ribs, minor burns and lacerations from the sheer physical feedback of his early, failed attempts to morph. What kind of training did you do? Asked the boy with half-white, half-red hair, Shoto Todoroki, his heterochromatic eyes analyzing Izuku coldly from the corner of the room. Just heavy lifting, Izuku replied vaguely, securing his master morpher tightly beneath the long sleeve of the pea jacket. I had to condition my body to handle the recoil of my quirk. Bakugo slammed his locker shut with unnecessary force. TCH. Stop showing off, Deku. A little muscle won't change the fact that you're a pebble. The tension in the room spiked, but Izuku merely locked his locker and walked out, his face calm. He didn't have the energy to engage Bakugo right now. He had a feeling Aizawa was about to test them in a way that would require all his focus. Out on the massive dirt field behind the school, Aizawa stood with his hands in his pockets. A quirk apprehension test? The class echoed in surprise after Aizawa announced their activity. What about the entrance ceremony? Or orientation? Uraraka asked worriedly. If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, Aizawa said dryly. UA's selling point is its unrestricted traditions. That goes for how the teachers run their classes too. He pulled a device out of his pocket. You kids have been doing these standard fitness tests since junior high. But you were always forbidden from using your quirks. The country still uses averages from records devoid of quirks. It's irrational. The Department of Education is procrastinating. Aizawa turned his gaze to Bakugo. Bakugo, you finished first in the practical exam. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? 67 meters, Bakugo replied arrogantly. Try doing it with your quirk. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Aizawa tossed the baseball to Bakugo. Hurry up. Give it all you've got. Bakugo stepped into the white circle painted on the dirt. He stretched his arms, a feral grin spreading across his face. He wound up his pitch. I'll add a little blast to the pitch. Die! With a deafening explosion that sent a shockwave of heat across the field, Bakugo launched the ball. It shot into the sky like a rocket, leaving a trail of black smoke. Aizawa held up his tracking device, showing the screen to the class. 705.2 meters. Know your own maximum first, Aizawa said. That is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero. 700 meters? Are you kidding me? Kaminari gasped. This looks like fun. A pink-skinned girl, Mina Ishido, cheered. We can use our quirks as much as we want. As expected of the hero course, Aizawa's eyes narrowed, his gaze suddenly turning incredibly dark and menacing. The air around him seemed to drop in temperature. It looks like fun, you say? Aizawa's voice was dangerously low. You have 3 years to become heroes. Are you going to have an attitude like that the whole time? All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be punished with expulsion. The class erupted in outrage. Expulsion? On the first day? Uraraka cried. That's completely unfair. Natural disasters, massive accidents, and selfish villains, Aizawa countered, his voice cutting through their complaints. Calamities whose time and place cannot be predicted. Japan is covered with unfairness. Heroes are the ones who reverse those situations. If you wanted to go talk to your friends at McDonald's after school, too bad. For the next 3 years, UA will do all it can to give you one hardship after another. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Overcome it with all you've got. He gestured to the field. The demonstration is over. The real thing starts now. Izuku stared at his hands. Expulsion. He had fought too hard, bled too much, and carried the weight of a dying alien warrior's legacy to be sent home on the first day. Aegis, Izuku thought, his mind slipping into the icy, analytical calm of the grid's combat focus. We need to dominate these tests without completely draining my physical stamina or revealing the true nature of the morpher. I need a tactical breakdown for grid cycling. Understood, Izuku. Aegis replied instantly. Grid cycling, the act of rapid shifting between ranger forms, will put immense strain on your bionetwork. To mitigate this, we will not utilize heavy armor or weapons. We will tap into the baseline physical enhancements of specific ranger frequencies for mere seconds at a time. Perfect. Let's show them what the ultimate red can do. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Izuku stood at the starting line, crouching low in a sprinter's stance. Next to him was a boy with multiple arms, Shoji. Down at the finish line, a small robotic camera hovered, ready to clock their times. Runners, on your marks, the robotic voice announced. Izuku reached to his left wrist, pulling back the sleeve to expose the master morpher. He twisted the outer dial. The red power coin flipped, locking into a new symbol, a 5-pointed star inside a circle. He didn't yell. He didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to the verbal activation command. He simply whispered, Zeo Ranger V, red. A flash of brilliant, geometric red light enveloped his body for a fraction of a second. When the light faded, Izuku was transformed. The Zeo red armor was distinct, a sleek, crimson suit adorned with golden accents across the chest and wrists. The helmet was an aggressive, aerodynamic design, with a gold, 5-pointed star carved directly into the faceplate to serve as his visor. "Get ready," the robot announced. "The Zeo crystal powers this form," Aegis whispered. "Its energy output increases exponentially over time, but for a short sprint, it provides unparalleled kinetic acceleration." Bang! The starting gun fired. Izuku didn't just run, he vanished. The ground beneath his boots shattered, asphalt kicking up in a cloud of dust. He moved with such velocity that he broke the sound barrier in the span of 20 meters. A sonic boom echoed across the field, blowing Shoji's hair back. Izuku was a red and gold blur, a streak of pure kinetic energy. He crossed the finish line before the sound of the starting gun had even finished echoing. 1.51 seconds, the robotic voice chirped. Izuku skidded to a halt, the Zeo suit hissing as it vented excess heat. He immediately tapped the morpher, dropping the transformation. The red armor dissolved into golden light, leaving Izuku standing in his P uniform, breathing slightly heavily but otherwise fine. Back at the starting line, the class stared in stunned silence. 1.5 seconds? Kaminari yelled, clutching his head. "That's faster than Ida." Ida, who had just run a 3.04 using his engine legs, adjusted his glasses, his jaw slack. Incredible, absolute, focused propulsion. Bakugo watched Izuku walk back to the group, his hands trembling with rage. He just summoned a completely different suit of armor. And it made him faster than sound. "What is this?" Aizawa watched Izuku closely, writing notes on his clipboard. "A transformation quirk that yields different forms based on the required utility." He used a heavy, strength-based armor against the robots, and a lightweight, speed-based armor for the dash. The versatility is terrifying. But what is the cost? Test 2, grip strength. Izuku approached the digital grip strength meter. He needed raw, localized, animalistic power. He twisted the morpher dial. The symbol changed to a roaring tiger. "Jungle Fury, red," he muttered. A flash of light. He was now clad in a sleek, athletic red suit with black tiger stripes running down the sides. The helmet featured a stylized tiger face. He gripped the meter with his right hand. He didn't just squeeze. He channeled the animal spirit of the tiger, a raw, primal surge of strength. The metal of the meter groaned, then cracked. He released it, dropping the morph instantly. The screen flickered, reading 850 kilograms before the screen cracked entirely. He broke the machine. A student muttered. Test 3, standing long jump. Izuku twisted the dial to a mystic emblem. Mystic Force, red. Clad in a suit adorned with a black cape and mystical runes, he channeled magical energy into his legs. He didn't just jump. He bounded through the air like he was defying gravity itself, clearing the sandbox entirely and landing perfectly on the grass beyond. By the time they reached the 5th test, the class was no longer just impressed. They were terrified. Izuku Midoriya was a one-man army, effortlessly shifting between different suites of powers, each perfectly suited for the task at hand. However, Izuku was feeling the burn. Grid cycling is brutal, he thought, wiping a thick sheen of sweat from his forehead as his vision swam slightly. The constant switching of energy frequencies was like dunking his nervous system in ice water, then boiling water, repeatedly. His heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Midoriya is dominating," Kirishima whispered to Kaminari. "It's like he has 5 different quirks." "Yeah, but look at him," Kaminari pointed out. "He looks like he's about to pass out." Bakugo, meanwhile, was a ticking time bomb. Every time Izuku produced a new suit, a new power, a new display of absolute superiority, a piece of Bakugo's fragile, ego-driven worldview fractured. Deku was supposed to be the pebble. He was the quirkless loser. When did he get this power? Why did he hide it from me? Test 5, softball throw. It was Izuku's turn. He walked into the painted circle, the baseball feeling heavy in his aching, slightly trembling hand. He needed distance. But he was running low on physical stamina. If he used the mighty Morphin Tyrannosaurus form and tried to throw it with raw strength, the muscle strain might tear his rotator cuff. He needed propulsion. He needed firepower. Aegis, Izuku thought. I need range velocity without physical strain. Recommendation, Space Patrol Delta. SBD Red Ranger. Aegis replied. The Delta blasters provide localized, concentrated concussive force that can be applied to external objects. Got it. Izuku raised his left arm. He didn't try to hide the morpher this time. He pressed the button. The coin flipped to a police badge emblem. SBD emergency. Izuku yelled, needing the verbal command to stabilize his wavering focus. A localized siren wailed, a sharp, piercing sound that made the class cover their ears. Red and blue police lights flashed wildly around Izuku. A massive, holographic police badge materialized, passing over his body from head to toe. When it faded, he stood in the SBD Red Ranger armor. It was deeply tactical, a heavy, red and black suit with the number 1 painted proudly on the left side of the chest. The helmet was sleek, featuring a flashing blue siren light integrated into the top. Another one? Uraraka gasped. How many does he have? Izuku tossed the baseball into the air. With lightning speed, he drew 2 heavy, high-tech handguns from his holsters, the Delta blasters. As the ball reached its apex and began to fall, Izuku aimed both blasters directly at it. He didn't fire lasers. He fired synchronized pulses of highly compressed, concussive air. Bang! 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 He juggled the ball in midair with the blaster shots, each impact driving it higher and faster into the sky, creating rings of displaced air. With one final, charged shot from both blasters combined, he sent the ball rocketing out of sight, leaving a contrail of white vapor in the blue sky. Izuku holstered the blasters and dropped the morph. He staggered slightly as the red light faded, his knees buckling for a fraction of a second before he caught himself. Aizawa held up the monitor. 805.3 meters. The class cheered. That was awesome. He shot it into orbit, but Izuku didn't hear them. His combat instincts, honed by the grid, screamed at him. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. DKU. The roar was demonic. Izuku spun around just as Bakugo launched himself through the air, propelled by massive explosions from his palms. Bakugo's face was twisted into a mask of absolute, unhinged fury, his teeth bared like a wild animal. He was aiming a devastating, explosive right hook directly at Izuku's face. Tell me how you did it. What is this quirk? You've been mocking me this whole time, haven't you? Bakugo, stop! Ida yelled, stepping forward, but he was too slow. Time seemed to slow down for Izuku. He was exhausted. He didn't have the energy to morph. If he took that explosion, he would end up in the infirmary, or worse. But he didn't need the armor. Oriko had given him the physical attributes, but the martial arts knowledge belonged to Izuku's mind now. He possessed the collective combat experience of men who had fought space armadas hand-to-hand. Bakugo was fast, violent, and powerful. But he was also completely undisciplined. His attack was a wild, telegraphed haymaker fueled entirely by emotion. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't step back. As Bakugo's explosive fist closed in, Izuku stepped inside his guard. He raised his left arm, using the hard, silver casing of the Master Morpher to parry Bakugo's forearm, deflecting the explosion harmlessly upward into the air. With his right hand, Izuku grabbed a fistful of Bakugo's pea jacket near the collar. He pivoted his hips, dropping his center of gravity, and used Bakugo's own immense forward momentum against him. It was a flawless, textbook judo throw, executed with the brutal efficiency of the Red Ranger martial arts. Izuku slammed Bakugo onto the hard dirt back first. The impact knocked the wind out of the blonde boy with a sickening thud. Before Bakugo could recover, Izuku fluidly transitioned into a ground grapple. He pinned Bakugo's right arm behind his back and pressed his knee firmly into Bakugo's shoulder blade, immobilizing him completely. The entire class froze. The explosive prodigy, the guy who had scored first in the entrance exam, had just been effortlessly dismantled in 2 seconds by the quiet kid, without the kid even using his quirk. Bakugo struggled wildly, coughing, his left hand sparking, but the angle Izuku had him pinned at made it impossible to aim an explosion without blowing his own head off. Let me go! Bakugo choked out, humiliated. I'll kill you! Izuku leaned down, his voice cold, steady, and vibrating with an authority that didn't belong to a 14-year-old boy. Listen to me, Kaken, Izuku said softly, so only Bakugo could hear. I didn't lie to you. I didn't hide anything to mock you. My power, it manifested recently. And it's not a game. I'm not the defenseless Deku you used to push around. I'm here to become a hero who protects people. If you want to fight me, do it as a hero, not as a bully. But if you attack me out of anger again, I will put you down. Suddenly, something tight and heavy wrapped around Izuku's torso. He was yanked forcefully backward off of Bakugo. Izuku stumbled back, looking down to see thick, gray cloth wrapping him like a mummy. He looked toward the source. Aizawa stood 10 feet away, his scarf extended, acting as a capture weapon. His black hair was floating wildly in the air, and his eyes were glowing a bright, terrifying crimson. He was using his erasure quirk. What the hell do you two think you're doing? Aizawa hissed, his voice echoing across the silent field. Are you children? This is a classroom, not a street brawl. Izuku realized Aizawa was erasing his quirk. Or rather, Aizawa thought he was erasing his quirk. Warning! Aegis chimed in. External biological nullification detected. The host's quirk factor is being targeted. However, as the host possesses no quirk factor, the nullification is having zero effect on the grid connection. You are still fully capable of morphing. I know. Izuku thought back quickly. But he can't know that. Izuku intentionally slumped his shoulders, acting as if a heavy weight had been placed upon him. He looked at the master morpher on his wrist, which he purposefully commanded to dim its subtle, internal red light, making it look dead. I apologize, Mr. Aizawa, Izuku said respectfully, bowing his head slightly. He attacked me. I merely defended myself. I didn't use my quirk. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. He maintained the erasure for a few more seconds, studying Izuku intensely. He really didn't use his quirk. That throw, that was pure, highly trained martial arts. The kid's physical baseline is extraordinary. Aizawa blinked, deactivating his quirk. His hair fell back to his shoulders, and his eyes returned to their tired, black state. His capture scarf retracted, unwrapping from Izuku. Bakugo, Aizawa said coldly, looking down at the blond boy who was slowly pushing himself off the dirt, glaring at Izuku with a mix of hatred and absolute shock. Control your temper. If you attack another student unprovoked again, I will expel you on the spot. Do you understand? Bakugo gritted his teeth, looking away. TCH, whatever, we're wasting time, Aizawa sighed, rubbing his dry eyes. Let's finish the rest of the tests. The rest of the apprehension test passed without further incident. Izuku used his baseline physical enhancements to score well above average in the distance run and the seated toe touch, refusing to morph again to save energy. When they gathered around the holographic scoreboard at the end of the class, Izuku found his name. Third place, Izuku Midoriya. He had placed behind Yaoyorozu, who had a creation quirk that dominated the utility tests, and Todoroki, who had overwhelming raw power. Bakugo was fourth. Izuku let out a long breath he didn't know he was holding. He was safe. By the way, I was lying about the expulsion, Aizawa announced casually, slipping back into his yellow sleeping bag. The class stared at him, jaws dropped. It was a rational deception to draw out the upper limits of your quirks, Aizawa smiled, a terrifying, Grinch-like grin. Anyway, we're done here. There are handouts with the syllabus in the classroom. When you get back, look them over. As Aizawa waddled away in his sleeping bag, the class let out a collective sigh of relief. A rational deception? Ida gasped. I should have known. Yuri is truly on another level. Izuku just smiled tiredly. He began the walk back to the locker room. Uraraka jogged up next to him, her face bright. You were amazing today, Midoriya. She cheered. You really showed Bakugo. He was acting like a total jerk. Thanks, Uraraka. Izuku smiled genuinely. I'm just glad we both get to stay. Later that evening, the sun had set over Mustafu, bathing the city in the neon glow of streetlights. Izuku lay on his bed in his darkened room, staring at the ceiling. The physical toll of the day was catching up to him, his muscles throbbing with a dull ache. But his mind was restless. He closed his eyes and focused his breathing. He reached inward, past his physical exhaustion, past the ambient noises of the city, tapping directly into the neural link provided by the master morpher. His physical surroundings melted away. Izuku found himself standing in his mindscape, the mental command center. It was a vast, circular room composed of dark, polished metallic floors and towering pillars of glowing blue light. In the center of the room was a massive holographic globe of the Earth, rotating slowly. Floating above it was Aegis, appearing as a shifting, multifaceted prism of pure white light. Status report Aegis, Izuku said, his mental avatar stepping up to the console. Physical recovery is proceeding at an acceptable rate. Aegis replied, the prism pulsing gently. Your performance today was exemplary, Izuku. You successfully maintained our cover story and established dominance within your peer group. Yeah, well, Bakugo isn't going to let that go, Izuku sighed, running a hand through his green hair. He's going to come at me twice as hard next time. But I can handle him. Bakugo Katsuki is not our primary concern, Izuku. Aegis's tone shifted. It lost its mentoring warmth, becoming stark, clinical, and grave. The holographic globe of the Earth in the center of the room suddenly shifted. Several bright, jagged red spikes appeared across the map, concentrated around Japan. What are those? Izuku asked, stepping closer, a sense of unease settling in his gut. They are dimensional fractures, Aegis explained. When you morph, Izuku, you draw a massive amount of energy from the morphing grid into this isolated universe. The grid is not a silent power. It rings like a bell across the multiverse. Izuku's eyes widened. You're saying, people can hear it? Not people. Entities. When the Guardian Oracle crashed in this dimension, he was pursued by a Rift Stalker, a foot soldier of the Dark Dimensional Empires. When you destroyed it, you released a beacon of red energy. The holographic globe zoomed in on the city of Mustafu. A dark, swirling vortex of purple energy began to pulse on the map. The enemies of the Rangers, the remnants of Lord Zed's empire, the Machine Empire, the forces of Dark Spectre, they hunt the Morphin Grid. They consume it. For millennia, this universe was hidden from them because it possessed no grid connection. But now I'm here, Izuku finished, his blood running cold. I'm a lighthouse. Precisely. By existing, and by using your power to protect this world, you are inadvertently drawing the attention of dimensional predators. I am detecting ambient dark matter signatures coalescing in the shadows of this city. They are small now, merely scouts drawn to the frequency. But they will grow. They will seek to take the Master Morpher from you, and they will slaughter anyone who stands in their way. Izuku stared at the pulsing purple vortex on the map. He thought of his mother sleeping in the next room. He thought of Uraraka, Ida, and even Bakugo. He thought of the entire city, oblivious to the cosmic horrors lurking just beyond the veil of reality. He was 14 years old. He had just started high school. He was supposed to be worrying about homework and hero licenses. Instead, he was the sole defender of a planet against a multidimensional war. Izuku clenched his fists. He didn't feel the paralyzing fear he used to feel when Bakugo cornered him. He felt the heavy, unyielding mantle of the ultimate red settling upon his shoulders. Let them come, Izuku said, his voice echoing in the vast expanse of the command center, filled with absolute resolve. I have the power of every Red Ranger who ever lived. If monsters want to threaten my world, they have to go through me. Spoken like a true leader. Aegis pulsed brightly. Rest well, Izuku. The storm is gathering. And you must be ready to weather it.